We're going to be travelling together in convoy for the next 12 or so days, and we want to talk to each other. We want car-to-car communications. Now, Greg is a bit of an expert with radios. Actually not a bit of an expert, he is an expert with radios, and he brought some 29 megahertz kits for us to talk to each other. But I want to try this. This is a Zartec license-free UHF radio with an extension on the antenna. It's basically just an extension lead with the same antenna. Using this inside the vehicle's steel cage becomes a bit like a Faraday cage. It actually restricts the output of a radio signal. So this we're going to put on the outside of the vehicle. It has a magnetic mount with a little piece of sponge, and then we're going to talk to each other via UHF. Now, I honestly don't know how good our communications are going to be. I have no idea. I've used UHF before, but not one as a good quality as this, not this particular model, and not with all of this paraphernalia. So this will be an interesting experiment. But just a thought, I also know a little bit about radios. If I put this antenna on the roof, I'm going to get a nice ground plane. The roof of the, I don't know if I'm right, I think I'm right. The roof of the vehicle will act as a ground plane and amplify, in effect, the signal. So I'm going to put it up here, because I think it's going to be better. Smack in the middle of the roof. Can you hear me?
Alright, we're on our way. We're just leaving Bruno. Last night we stayed at Vastrap Jachtplaas, or Vastrap Hunting Farm.
So the big thing is that these radios, now UHF is basically FM, ultra high frequency, license free. The licensing authority only, you know, when you purchase a radio, they basically register the radio and not the antenna. So we are using a standard set that you can buy in the shops.
This is the intersection. We've just left the farm. We're going to turn right now, go towards Gruno, and then from Gruno down to Canyon Lodge. I've been to Canyon Lodge a few occasions. Very nice place. And we'll see what Mr. White has to say.
Okay, why don't you go? I mean, it's a flat road. It's not completely flat, because once you're over that rise, you'll be out of sight.
Yeah.
Do you want to zero your odo?
Yeah.
And let's count it down. Let's actually measure the range.
Okay.
Alright, I'll stay here until we lose comms, and when we lose comms I'll chase you.
Alright. We're busy testing these Zartec radios, and I want to see what sort of range we get. It's a very low powered radio. Initially I wasn't particularly inspired by the idea, but let's try. Let's see what we get.
Okay, now so he's gonna go off and see, and we'll see how the range does.
Andrew, as we go.
Okay, I read you.
Okay, that's probably
Oh, that's 500 meters. Now going over the little rise.
after the rise. The road is flat all the way to Gruno, which is
Probably 2 kilometers.
Okay, you're just out of sight now. This is good.
you're starting to get stretchy my side.
And it is now 1.4 kilometers.
This is interesting. I'm reckoning on about 3.5. That's what I reckon.
Did you copy?
Okay, we're now at 2 kilometers.
I think these external antennas are making a difference.
No, it's a massive difference.
But now here's the thing. You can actually, it's not actually strictly legal, because you can buy a high gain antenna.
3
Kilometers of it.
3 kilometers, still reading you.
Very stretchy my side.
It is starting to get scratchy.
Okay, we're now at 3.1.
Still copying.
Sorry, 3.5.
That's quite impressive, actually. That's quite. Now, the high gain antenna You won't buy it from your average, the same store where you'll buy the Zartec radios. They won't sell you it because they're not allowed to. They're only allowed to sell you an
4 kilometers over.
About 4 out of 5.
It's more than I thought it would be.
Okay,
4.5 kilometer range.
Still got you. Now, a high gain antenna actually amplifies the signal. Not strictly allowed. Go to a radio ham shop. They'll sell you one, and then you'll get even more. But I'm not going to test it because, strictly speaking, it's not legal.
5 kilometers over.
5 kilometers is more than sufficient for convoy driving.
No copy. Say again.
Okay, I'm going to pull over at the intersection and wait for you over.
That's a negative copy, just very scratchy. So I would say maximum 5 kilometers. That's kind of answered our question over. Okay, there you go. Conclusion, 5 kilometers absolute maximum with good
Andrew, do you still copy over?
or flat-ish ground. It's not line of sight because of this hill.
Okay, we've lost comms now. It's using this little Zartec handheld radio with a microphone. We've managed reasonable communications for 5 kilometers.
And do you copy? I'm now on top of the rise.
29 and 27 is essentially the same. Both systems are AM or amplitude modulation, which tends to be noisy. It'll pick up car noise, it picks up ignition, it'll pick up your GPS, it'll pick up your fridge, so you'll have a bit of noise. But it's a cheap option, and the biggest thing is that everyone, in inverted commas, uses 29 megahertz. So my experience has been, you're in the Kalahari and you'll find at least 10-15 other people on 29 megahertz, and they tend to talk to one another, and I've seen a line here and I've seen a hyena there, and it works for that purpose. Your range is limited to probably 3-5 kilometers, somewhere around there, sometimes a bit less if it's hilly terrain. VHF is the band from 140 to 174 megahertz. It's FM, so it's much clearer, and your radio is putting out anything from 30 to 50 watts depending on the radio, whereas on AM you're putting out 4 watts. And ideally you'll have a range of 30 kilometers, in hilly country a little bit less, but also because of the frequency, it doesn't tend to bend over obstacles. So if you're standing at the base of a hill, the person on the other side at the base won't hear you, but somebody 15 kilometers away will hear you, because the signal goes over the mountain. It won't just drop down the other side. UHF is the band from 430 megahertz upwards to, I think it's 470, but you're going to find there that it's even more accentuated. The radios put out the same power, and it's the preferred system in Australia, but as soon as there's mountains, you're very limited with range because of the signal not bending. There is a third or fourth option, and that's mid-band, which is between 50 and 80 megahertz, which is fantastic. It bends over mountains, it works like a dream, but there's hardly anybody on it. The Off-Road Radio Association applied for VHF frequency. I think they've now got 4 or 5. Again, it's becoming the second 29 megahertz, because everyone that has VHF is on one of the what we call AURA channels, standing for Off-Road Radio Association. So VHF and 29 megs, my belief is your primary radio should be 29 megahertz, and your secondary radio should be VHF, UHF, or anything else. If you are a loner, I was going to use the word antisocial, but if you're a loner and you just travel with 1 or 2 friends, then anything will work, because you're going to buy for your group. So then the Zartec radio would work perfectly, any of the license-free radios, because they're on a frequency that the rest of us are not on. So you're essentially limited to your group. The only problem I always have is the charging. That's fine if you're driving from lodge to lodge like we are on this trip, but if you're going to be in the bush for 2 weeks, you've got to charge the radios. and it's a bit of a nuisance. That's been my experience. But each to his own. It's nice having walkie-talkies, whether they be Zartec or anything else. If you're going to stay in a place and somebody's going hiking, or the kids are walking off or riding their bicycles, at least you can communicate with them. So each one has its application. And then if you really think you are the adventurer, then I would suggest you buy an HF radio. You can talk around the world. The license is expensive. The radios are, if you buy new, probably close to 25,000 Rand a radio, but you'll talk around the world. Before satellite phones, I had one in my car, and when I was working in Namibia, Angola, I could talk back to my house, no problem, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 kilometers. Basically a ham radio, or the equivalent of, but a commercial version. But these days I've got a satellite phone, it's quick and easy, and it's half the price.